Please listen carefully.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 20th episode of the Study Space Podcast, a show dedicated to helping students like you earn better grades, navigate your college journey, and become lifelong learners. My name is Julian Vu, the founder and lead software engineer of Uniplan, and I will be your host for today. And that's actually the first time I've ever had to do that intro because David usually does these and I come in second to introduce myself. But David is unfortunately not going to be joining us on the episode today. However, I do have a very special guest on the show. Joining me today is William Chau, who recently graduated from SJSU, my alma mater, if you remember from previous episodes. So first of all, welcome to the show, William, and congratulations on graduating. Why don't you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, my name is William Chau. I've just recently, this past spring 2020, graduated from SJSU, San Jose State University, with a degree, a Bachelor's of Science in chemistry, with a concentration in biochemistry. So that was quite the struggle, to say the least.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah. It was a long 4 years. Let's just keep it like that. I'm interested in quite a few things. Video and photography, one of them. Video and photography are one of them. But most close to my heart, I'd have to say, is automotive stuff. So mostly driving cars, not fixing them, because fixing them is a boring and painful part.
But you do know a lot about fixing up cars, right? Like I've seen a couple of things that you've done and you used to talk about fixing up cars all the time, right? And then you also took, if I recall correctly, you also took classes in high school about it, right?
Yeah. So funny thing is, before getting into college, I was thinking of actually attending a local community college, De Anza, for their automotive technology program. And that was because I really didn't know what I wanted to do, right? So and I knew cars interested me, but the thing that swayed me away from that was the labor involved, because I've already started working on cars because of my automotive technology classes that I've taken in high school. So, and that's just a lot of manual labor, and I was like, it's cool and all that you get to witness your final project coming to life, but on the other side, that's a lot of hours invested into something that could potentially come out to just not work at the end of the week,
Right. Yeah, I get that. And then, that's part of the reason why you ended up going to university studying chemistry, right?
Yeah. So like a secondary interest that I had in high school was chemistry. And that was primarily because I've taken honors chemistry and AP chemistry during my sophomore and junior years of high school. And I met a wonderful professor there, Dr. Anita Wu. She's a pharmacist, and we'll get into this later, but she's the reason why I've decided to go into the field of pharmacy. So
Nice.
Her teaching style was just amazing. And it really captivated me and interested me in the field of chemistry. So I said, why not? I'll just go into chemistry.
Wow, super cool. Well, I guess before we get started, we usually start out these episodes by asking everybody what their inspiration is. So I guess since David isn't here to ask me my inspiration, I'll take David's role and I'll actually ask you, what is inspiring you today?
Oh boy. What's inspiring me today? So these past few weeks of summer vacation amidst the coronavirus pandemic and all, I've really thought a lot about family and how that on its own has driven me to go ahead and pursue what I really like to pursue, So obviously growing up, I've been told stories of my parents not having the opportunities that I have. For example, my father was a refugee, and you know, coming up in America with essentially nothing and hearing that, that's it's tough. So I I take that and I take that stuff very personally. And I feel like that the opportunities that I have, I should be taking advantage of to their fullest potential that's physically possible for me. So, um, really, that's been my inspiration for the longest time, and it's helped so much in going through these past 4 years of college too, because with all this course load, coursework, assignments, dealing with non-compliant partners and whatnot, it's the thing that pushes me through, and I feel like guides me through difficult situations.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think your inspiration is something that resonates with a lot of students. Family is a strong source of motivation, of resilience. It's the source of a lot of people's goals, really. So I think, especially with so many immigrants that come to the United States, a lot of our parents, right? They came to this country all with the goal of starting a new life, and above all with children, right? The whole point of going to this country is that this country brings the hope of a better life than the ones that they led in their home countries. So I think this is going to resonate so much with students all over the country. Wow, that's excellent. And we've had guests on the show before who've also mentioned family, and it's very obvious why, because family is just such a strong source of inspiration for so many students. And the reason why by the way, the reason why we ask everybody's inspirations every single time we do the podcast is because it makes sense that our inspirations change, right? They can differ from time to time. Sometimes we're motivated by different things at different points in our lives. Sometimes we're motivated by a project. Sometimes we're motivated by something that somebody said, right? But one thing that I find that everybody always goes back to is family, and it's not because it's an easy answer. It's because it's true. So again, I think that's going to be an idea that's going to resonate with a lot of students out there. For me, my inspiration is going to be a little bit more lighthearted than yours. But it's an inspiration nonetheless. And actually, you know what? That's a lie, because it actually does have to do with family. So my inspiration today is an organization called OpenStax, and the Stacks is spelled STAX. So openstax.org is a website that I believe is affiliated with Rice University, and they provide completely free, open online textbooks for a variety of different subjects, ranging from math to history and physics and biology, chemistry, all of these different subjects that a lot of undergraduates are taking at this point. They even have a couple of textbooks aligned to AP classes, so for high school students as well. And the reason why this is related to family is because my brother actually recently graduated from 6th grade. And this is going to sound a little bit weird, but in my school district, because I went to the same school as he did, and in my school district, 6th grade is still considered elementary school. I understand that 6th grade for many other schools is actually in middle school already. It's at the intermediate level. Was that the case for you, William?
Yeah, it's the case up here in the Bay Area.
Yeah, down there where I went to school, I think in the neighboring districts, 6th grade was also at the intermediate level, but in my district, for some reason, sixth grade was still at elementary school. So I guess this is the year where in our school district, he graduated from elementary school, and he'll be moving on to officially to middle school in the fall, and hopefully all of this dies down. But as every single day passes, the pandemic looks like it's going to be dragged on and on and on. So I don't know if he's going to go back to class in the fall, but we'll see. But anyway, he's going to be taking the dive into walking to class, right? He doesn't have a homeroom necessarily no more. He's going to go class to class. He's going to study like 5 different things every single day. And one of those things is undoubtedly going to be math. And he actually asked me to help him learn some algebra, which is funny because in 7th grade, I don't think many students actually learn algebra. I think they start out with pre-algebra. I know there are some bright students out there who jump into algebra and then they take geometry later on, but I think students traditionally start with pre-algebra. But my brother wanted to learn algebra 1. And I was like, okay, I'll do that because, you know, I have a degree in computer science. I can do some algebra, right? And so then I went to this website, openstacks.org, and they had an Algebra 1 textbook, an elementary Algebra 1 textbook that I have been using as the method by which I teach my little brother Algebra 1. And he's been following along. I've been creating video lectures for him, and I've been uploading it onto YouTube, and he's been watching it and following along because we don't live together. I actually live away from home. So the only way that I can teach him is remotely. So funny enough, I'm not an actual teacher, but I've been teaching remotely to my brother Algebra 1 using OpenStax. So that's the reason why OpenStax is inspiring me today, because they publish a variety of different free open sourced textbooks that anybody can use completely free of charge, and it's allowed me to mentor and teach my little brother, and that's what has been inspiring me today. Okay, fantastic. So with that out of the way, let's go into some of our discussions here. So William already hinted at the beginning of the episode that his background is in chemistry, and he wants to do pharmacy. So I guess the first question is, what inspired you to go this route, and what motivates you to keep going? Because chemistry and pharmacy aren't easy by no means, right? So you have to have a lot of motivation to go through all of your studies, go through all of these rigorous classes, and to pursue and continue to pursue this field. So I guess what inspired you to pursue this field, and what motivates you to keep going?
All right. So as I've mentioned before, I've taken AP chemistry in high school, and my teacher there was actually had a doctorate in pharmacy. So that was essentially my first exposure to the career. She never really pushed pharmacy on me. In fact, I actually went to her when I was inquiring about getting into the profession during my sophomore year. And speaking about sophomore year, that's when, for SJSU at least, that's when we're introduced to the field of organic chemistry. So this is just a bunch of carbons, hydrogens, oxygens, and whatnot. And what a lot of people don't know is that, and this is including me as well, a lot of the medicines, a lot of the drugs, a lot of the biological functions are because of organic chemistry, right? These carbons, these hydrogens, oxygens, and other molecules, these other macromolecules, are what essentially dictate our lives. So that was definitely another factor in my career at SJSU that pushed me towards pharmacy. But at this point, I was not 100% sure that I wanted to go into pharmacy yet. I was kind of torn between going into pharmacy and going into a PhD in chemistry. But in the end, pharmacy won out. And that's primarily because of my my biochemistry classes that I've began to take my junior year and senior year of SJSU. So in these classes, we integrate the topics learned in biology with the concepts learned in chemistry. So for a lot of people, I know you're going like, what? Chemistry and biology in one class? Are you crazy? And yeah, we are kind of crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
For having to, put up with both. But once you start, delving deep into the processes and how the biochemistry can be applied to, for example, medications and stuff like that, that's what really hooked me. I think that was the ultimate turning factor into transitioning me from being wishy-washy on whether or not to go into pharmacy. And yes, I do want to go into pharmacy. It was because of biochemistry. I also did some volunteering. Well, I wouldn't say some at this point. I have about 400 hours, 500 hours-ish of volunteering at Santa Clara Valley Medical Center at a small pharmacy called Better Health Pharmacy. And what we do at this pharmacy is dispense medication, which are all donated from pharmacies around the Bay Area to anybody essentially, just as long as you have a valid prescription. We'll just give it to you for free. And it's a fantastic resource to help out the San Jose community. And I'm honestly glad to be a part of it. And I think, so essentially what turned me towards pharmacy was because of my biochemistry classes and actually doing volunteering work at a local pharmacy.
Wow, a lot to unpack there. So,
Yep.
So I guess if I'm hearing you right, it started all in high school, right, with your chemistry teacher. Mm-hmm. And I guess, I mean, some students out there will say that that's pretty early to figure out what you want to do. Did you think that was early? Were you like dead set on that, on this field, on this path from then on, or were you just latching on to the one thing that you found interest in?
Well, for me, it was just about stuff that interested me. Pharmacy to me in high school was just nothing but working at a CVS or working at a Walgreens, mm-hmm. Little did I know it's much more than that. But I wouldn't say that I was dead set on pharmacy until my junior year of college. Mm-hmm. But the idea was definitely in the back of my head. It's just that it never came into fruition until the time of junior year of college, when I was taking my first biochemistry courses.
I guess you eventually got to align yourself to this path, I guess, but you never really, it wasn't like a dead set, like I'm 100% going into this field right at the ripe age of what, 16, 17?
Yeah, 16, 17. Of course I know what I want to do at 16 and 17. Who doesn't, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, everybody out there, like, they're always like, oh, like you should have your life figured out, right? Like you're going to university for a reason. You should know exactly what you want to do. But and this is exactly the reason why I ask this question, is because the reality is that not everybody knows what they're really going to do. Mm-hmm. And you can plan until you die, right? But in my experience, there's only so much planning you can do before something goes wrong. And I say wrong in the lightest way possible, because really when something derails a plan, the only thing you can do is just replan, right? Or adapt to a changing situation, right? Mm-hmm. But my point is that at that young age, I don't think really feasible for you to really know exactly what you want to do. And I tell this to my friends sometimes. I say like, oh, like I figured out what I wanted to do like in middle school. Like I loved working with computers. And so obviously I'm going to study computer science. But I'm going to be honest here. In middle school, what do you really know about computer science other than like, oh, people type on the computer and then it makes it, do programs and stuff? Like, okay, Sure. And then in high school, you might take like one computer science class or maybe like a web design class, and you're like, oh, okay, gotcha. So it turns out that people type some code and it makes stuff appear on the screen. But even that is just barely scratching the surface. Even at high school, you don't really understand what computer science is. So the fact that I say like, oh, like I figured out I wanted to do computer science in like middle school, like that's partially true, only partially. And it took a lot out of me to stick to my studies. I'm not gonna lie and say I didn't want to give up, right? There were times where the classes were tough and I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to make it because it's just so hard. And I like to say this a lot, but I graduated early. Like I graduated in 3 years, and there were a lot of times where even that, like I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do the 3 years anymore because it's just too hard. Like I'm taking too many classes at once just to have this superficial goal of getting out early. So my point is, when you're that young, you can't expect to know what you want to do. But the point is that you had a general direction that you were moving towards, and eventually you sort of closed in on some path that you wanted to follow, right?
Yeah,
does that pretty much sum up your approach?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the proper term, and when looking at it, and from the viewpoint of a middle schooler, would be that the seeds are essentially just planted there, right? Your interest is sparked from there. It's not really a choice at that point, because at the age of 10, 11, what are you really choosing? You're not choosing anything. You're just choosing things that interest you. I mean, even now, right? You mentioned adapting, overcoming the different struggles and stuff like that in during college, right? Like I didn't know I was going to graduate this spring. I actually figured out that I could graduate this spring not even a year ago, probably less than a year ago. I'd say maybe the beginning of fall 2019. So not even that long ago.
Wow.
So yeah, I had the same feeling too. I thought I was just going to graduate in 4.5 years, but I was able to manage to squeeze down my coursework into 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just
now let's talk about that coursework. Let's talk about that coursework for a minute, because I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but we originally met in Calculus 2, right?
Yeah.
And from what I've heard from my peers and some other friends who go to different schools, Calculus 2 is a pretty hard class, period. Regardless of school, like doesn't matter where you go, Calculus 2 is just really hard. And I'm not entirely sure if it's because the material is hard or because there's just so much work that goes into Calculus 2. But we met in Calculus 2. And the reason why I mention all of this, like all the difficulty of Calculus 2, is because it really forced everybody to work really, really hard every single day, day in, day out. You go to class. I mean, okay, here's the thing about Calculus 2 at our school. I don't know if you remember, William, but we had class every single day, right? As opposed to every other day.
Yeah, that was oh geez, I'm glad I forgot that. That was torture. But it was from Monday to Thursday, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 4 days in a row.
Oh,
you had class for an hour every day, right? Whereas normally you'd have an hour and a half every other day, I think is how that works out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But you had to, so you had to go to class every single day, and then you had to go to workshop every other day. Right. So it was like another like calculus level thing that you had to do. And that had problems on its own that I really don't want to go into.
Yeah,
but my point is that
podcast itself.
yeah. Just talking about the shenanigans that went into that workshop. But anyway, the reason why I mention all of this stuff is because it really showed me that you were an excellent student, period. Like, no doubt you were an excellent student, because nobody really expects, like, you go into college, right? Your freshman year, everybody tells you to take it easy. Everybody tells you like, hey, it's your first year, you know, like have fun, experience everything, join clubs, do this, do that, don't care about grades. Like you can get good grades in your sophomore, junior, or senior year, you know, when you graduate. And you were one student who really just took all the homework seriously, did all the studying, and you got super high scores. You went to workshop, you studied. I mean, we studied together, like God knows, we studied together so many evenings, just sitting in the library doing math problems all day, right? So I guess, and the more impressive thing is that you continued to be that exemplary student. I mean, we met up, you know, statistically, I don't understand how this could have happened, but we stayed friends. We remained friends. We remained in contact, and you know, we would talk to each other about what we were doing. We would meet up on campus, and you'd show me what you were working on, and we'd talk. And you were still an excellent student to the very end. So my question is, what's the secret? Like, what do you do that keeps you in the loop, keep earning those grades, keep studying? Like, what's the secret?
What's the secret? You know, Julian,
because everybody thinks there's a secret, right? Like all A students have a secret. So like, what's your secret?
Oh man. There's a lot that goes into it. Secrets, it's not really a secret. If you know me, and you do know me, the secret is you just have to like what you're doing, right? First of all, if you want to succeed. But obviously, in the cases that you don't like something, such as calculus, right, then other things are going to need to come into play. That's where the whole discipline comes in. And I feel very strongly about discipline because setting a schedule for yourself is probably the most essential thing you can do as a college student. And why? A lot of people might ask, why? Well, why? The reason why is that if you set your time, you set a place, you set a time dedicated just to work on something such as calculus or chemistry, then your focus is primarily, well, no, it shouldn't primarily, it has to be on that subject, right? And nothing else. So that you dedicate that time to completely absorb the material. You dedicate that time to build a complete understanding of that material. And that eventually translates into your good grades or other goals that you're interested in. And, you know, this doesn't just apply to school or whatnot. In fact, as recently, I've been challenging myself these past few weeks to complete 20,000 steps a day. So that's essentially like doing 10 miles every day of walking. And I wake up super early for that. And I think the mindset is that you shouldn't be looking at these things as it requires a shift in your mindset. You should be saying, for these types of challenges, this is just what I normally do, you know? This is a part of my life.
Yeah.
You know, these struggles, this is a part of my life. I'm just going to go through them, you know? The same thing for my 20,000 steps a day, waking up at 4:30 in the morning. You think that's easy? No, of course not. But it's what I do, right? And if you talk to other people that I know, that I've made friends with in the past 2 years, one thing that they'll tell you is, dang, William wakes up way too early. And it's because, you know, it's just what I
Everybody
do.
said that about us.
Yeah. And that was 7:30, right? I dialed that time way back. I dialed it like 2 hours back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, it's that mindset change that gets you through these things. So the thing that rules above all, like even above your interests and thing, is your discipline. So if you're not well disciplined and you don't hold yourself accountable, I think accountability is one of the more important things when discussing discipline. Then you'll be able to achieve your goals. So, and that's how we came out of calculus 2 with A's, you know?
Yeah. No, I hear you. Discipline is a huge part of of student success. I truly believe that. And unfortunately, discipline isn't something that you could just like decide to have, right? It's something that you have to build up over time. It's a system of time, practice, routine, doing it over and over again until you build up a good amount of discipline to be able to tell yourself, hey, I gotta put my head down and I gotta do this, right? And if you don't have that discipline, don't be discouraged, because it just takes time to build up that kind of discipline. Now, that discipline has resulted in your gaining admission to UCSF. Is that right?
Yeah. It's kind of crazy to think about how that happened. But yeah, I did obtain myself a spot for this coming summer, actually. In the
Summer.
class of 2020, yeah, in the class of 2023 for UCSF's pharmacy program.
Wow. And is this for a like a doctorate degree?
Yeah. So the degree I'm going for is a PharmD, which is just shorthand for doctor of pharmacy. So yeah.
Gotcha. So UCSF, obviously a big name in the medical field in general, right? Huge graduate level school. It's the only UC that only accepts graduate students. They don't have an undergraduate class, right?
Yeah,
So
that's correct.
Obviously a big name. So tell me about that. Tell me about your choice of going to UCSF. Was that the only school you were considering? Were there others? Like, why did you ultimately choose UCSF?
So UCSF is a great school. Of course, we all know that. But financially, this is important to me. Financially, it's also a great school. And why is that? It's because I have family that live in Oakland, and I can essentially just live in Oakland and commute to UCSF via BART and Muni. So that already takes off a lot of the living cost from me. And attending a UC is by no means cheap. We've had this discussion before, Julian, if you remember. We were super thankful for just attending San Jose State.
Yeah.
Because of the substantial difference in the prices. But other than that, other than the financial reasons, UCSF is a great school because it receives. Okay, well, let me take a step back. Actually, so UCSF, the campus is the campus where the students roam, is also integrated with the hospital space as well.
Right.
So there's a lot of hands-on experience, a lot of first-hand experience that you'll be dealt with during your time at UCSF. In addition to this, there's a lot of research that happens at UCSF. One of the things that UCSF likes to show off is the NIH, the National Institute of Health grants that they get every year. UCSF essentially gets the most, from what I understand, and they've been getting the most grant money for the past, I don't know, at least 10 years, at least 5 years. I know that for sure. So those are the things that are that definitely put UCSF at the top of my list of choices. Other schools that I've looked at and gained some interest in was University of the Pacific, which is located in Stockton, California. And I picked that one primarily because my cousins went there. I have two cousins that are also pharmacists, and they both attended University of the Pacific. Other schools, they're primarily down in SoCal, but I honestly couldn't imagine myself down in SoCal. I'm essentially just a Northern Californian boy living out here in my Northern Californian lifestyle. So if I could keep it up here, then I'm going to keep it up here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's essentially the reasons why I've chosen UCSF.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, some people will know I'm a transplant to the Bay Area. I grew up in Orange County in sunny Southern California, and I moved up to the Bay Area for school, and here I'm back in Southern California for work, right? But yeah, up and down the coast. So that's great. So UCSF in the end, that was your decision. Now that's a huge decision to make, and that's a decision that's going to determine a great deal of the course of your future life, right? So
Yes.
speaking of future plans, we spoke periodically throughout our undergraduate careers, and one semester you tell me about this plan, and then the next year you tell me, oh, I changed that, I had a different idea, I'm going to take a different approach. So my understanding is that you changed your plans for the classes you were going to take, or how many you were going to take, and what kind of path you were going to follow several times throughout your undergrad career. So can you tell us a little bit about those changes that you made, and sort of the thought process behind those changes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. So let me first off start by saying it's okay to make changes, right? Nobody's going into college knowing exactly what they want to do, right? Even though people pretend like they know, they're just pretending like they know. They don't really know what they want to do. So it's okay to make changes, and that's what happened to me. What's important is that you know what you want to do, right? You have to know yourself. And fortunately, I did know what I wanted to do. Well, not wanted to do, but what interested me, and that was chemistry. And I did make multiple changes in my plans in undergrad, and it's primarily because of things like getting a C in introductory physics, introductory calculus-based physics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was originally on track to transfer from a BA in chemistry to a BS in chemistry. And the primary difference there is a few elective classes and the physics classes that you have to take, as well as the math classes. But when I took Physics 50 for the first time, and I essentially did horrible, like that was the worst grade that I've ever gotten in my entire school career.
Mm-hmm.
That really put me in my place, and I was like, wow, I really don't. There are things I do not know, and there are things that I really can't. Well, not can't. I know I can do it. It's just that I know that don't interest me enough that make me want to push harder towards that direction.
Right. You don't love it enough that you'd think you can just power through if something goes, if something gets too tough, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and believe it or not, those things exist. And Physics 50 was that class for me. That class did it. That class did it to me. Did it to me dirty. Dropped my GPA just like that. Yeah. So anyways, I was like, all right. So clearly I hate physics. So what's my next option? So I looked into the degree options for things that could interest me. Like what I remember, one of the things that interested me was biomedical engineering, but that required Physics 50. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to take another semester of Physics 50 again. And then I found chemistry, BS chemistry with a concentration in biochemistry. And lo and behold, didn't need Physics 50. You just needed the algebra-based physics. So I celebrated, and then I took the remaining prerequisite classes for that and changed my major to BS chemistry with a concentration in biochemistry. And from there, I just decided that, okay, so I've changed my major. Now, what do I do after I graduate? Do I pursue a PhD, or do I go into the industry, or do I go and pursue pharmacy? These are all questions that for sure every single college student you have to decide, because these are important decisions, right? You're not going to college for fun, right? We're here to better ourselves, and we're here to better society. So that's bottom line. I feel like that's our obligation to society for going to college. We're trying to improve what already exists here in this world. So for me, that ended up being pursuing pharmacy, and that whole spiel about how I got interested in pharmacy and what specifically led me to choosing pharmacy. Well, just listen a little bit earlier into the podcast and you'll know that story.
Yeah, so a couple of things stand out in this story to me, at least. One is that your plans changed multiple times due to different difficulties, different variables that come in that you could not have really planned for, right? Like, who plans to fail a class? I don't think anybody ever goes into a class planning to fail. I mean, you didn't fail, but you got a grade that you weren't happy with, right? And that sort of changed your perspective on a couple of things. So the one thing that stands out to me in particular is that you weren't afraid of changing your plans when you needed to change them. And that's huge, because a lot of students think like, oh, if something goes wrong in my plan, if I get a C here or an F here, then my entire plan is ruined and I'm never going to find success ever again in my entire life. And yet you still did, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that stands out to me is, right, exactly. You graduated in 4 years and you got into UCSF, no less. And the other thing that stands out to me is that you got a C, which for a lot of people, that's a pretty low grade for UCSF, and yet you still got in. And all props to you. Like, that's huge, right? That goes to show what hard work, what shifting a plan, and how you can sort of base your passion and your goals from some source of motivation, and I guess you demonstrated that motivation and that passion to your interviewers at UCSF, and they resonated with that, and you got in, right? The lesson that teaches me is that grades don't always matter. At least they're not the only thing that matters, right? Of course they matter, because that's what we're measured on, but it's not the only thing that matters. And that's an idea that not all students have, right? They think that, oh, it's school, and the only purpose of school is to get grades, right? So obviously, if I get a poor grade in something, then I'm a complete and utter failure. And that's not true. That's absolutely not true, right? You still moved forward despite getting a grade in a subject that you know yourself to not really excel in. Right. And that's huge. I think that's a huge idea. It's something that I believe, right? If you can't do something, go to a different route, or maybe it's just a system of time. Maybe you just needed more time. And unfortunately, the education system doesn't really accommodate for more time. You just have to do something in a certain amount of time, and you can delay and delay, retake, but at the end of the day, you want to get started with something, right? So props to you for changing course when you needed to change course, and look at where you are right now. I mean, just astounding. So I'm gonna jump out here and let's go into the future a little bit. So everybody knows I'm a computer science major. David is in electrical engineering. We're both engineering kids, right? So we talk about engineering a lot, and we've had, funny enough, we've had so out of 4 guests, 3 are in the general study of medicine. One is plans on going to, or 2 of them are planning to go to med school. One of them is a chemistry major, and you're a chemistry major too. So, but you're the first pharmacist out of the group. Everybody wants to become a medical doctor, a physician, and you're the first pharmacist on the show. So, I'm not very familiar with pharmacy as a career path. So I guess my first question is, what does the education look like for somebody who wants to go into pharmacy? And then what happens after that? What happens after school?
So when you talk about the education, are you talking about the courses that I'll be taking when I'm in the school?
Yeah, like, what kind of courses are you going to be taking? How much school is there, right? Because like sometimes, like you have to go through your undergrad, right? Like, what does your grad degree look like? Is it, is it 4 years or is it 6 years? Like, what is it? What does it look like?
Okay. Okay.
And then after that, what happens?
Okay. So to start off, well, I can speak for UCSF specifically. They require a 4-year degree, so you need to get your undergrad first, I believe. Actually, don't quote me on that. I don't think you need your undergrad, but most pharmacy schools will require a 4-year degree before you enter. So that's already 4 years. Now, pharmacy school to pharmacy school, it depends. Some pharmacy schools are 4-year programs, and some pharmacy schools have 3-year programs. UCSF has just recently transitioned from a 4-year program to a 3-year program. And the primary purpose of that is to allow for their students to get into their applied pharmacy practice work, essentially.
Gotcha.
Sooner. Yeah, so they're able to get into those pharmacy settings sooner and become a part of the workforce sooner. In terms of coursework, I'm not too knowledgeable about the coursework in UCSF, but to my knowledge, it's based off of different organ systems. So, I mean, the first thing you'll do is be introduced to just a broad review of what you should know already, which is essentially all the biochemistry that you've done, the chemistry, organic chemistry, stuff like that. But it's obviously going to be geared towards pharmacy. I don't know how that will be. We'll have another podcast again about this in a few months.
Yeah.
But after that, we're going to be going into different organ systems, and I'm assuming different medications used to treat different sort of conditions regarding those organ systems. This is just super, super broad, but I believe that most pharmacy schools have this approach where they look at different organ systems, such as the digestive system, the cardiovascular system, and the different medications that they are able to use to help with certain conditions. In addition to this, there's also these things called IPPEs and APPEs, IPPEs and APPEs. So the IPPEs are the introductory pharmacy practice experience, and the APPE is the advanced pharmacy practice experience. Again, I'm not entirely too knowledgeable about this, but the IPPEs are intended for essentially getting student pharmacists' feet into the door of the world of pharmacy. So they'll learn about, the basic stuff like dispensing medication, possibly dealing with insurance, giving injections, counseling patients. I'm not entirely sure if counseling patients is one of them, but it's essentially just a setting that allows students to practice the skills that they've essentially just talked about in theory in their classes.
Right.
APPEs, on the other hand, are more specific to my knowledge. So much like medical school, there's a lot of different fields in pharmacy. For example, one of the fields of pharmacy that I'm interested in is nuclear pharmacy. And that is going to be completely different from what pharmacists do at a Walgreens, for example, right? For nuclear pharmacy, you're going to be dealing with radioactive isotopes and using them in medications. So that's obviously going to require a different skill set as opposed to what is learned, what a pharmacist in Walgreens, for instance, learns, right? There's also clinical pharmacy, which the pharmacist works closely with doctors and discuss about different medications and the proper dosages and how long exactly the medications will stay in the body. And in addition to that, how long it will take for the body to metabolize that medication. So the APPEs are built for that. They're built to introduce, and this is a big word, introduce students to different fields of pharmacy. Now, what happens after these 3 years are up are what a lot of people in the field of pharmacy nowadays are essentially getting into, which are the not rotations. They're
Is it residency?
yeah, there you go, residency. The word left my mind, residency.
Yeah.
So yes, there is pharmacy residencies. They exist out there. So let's say you find something that interests you. Let's say clinical pharmacy, for example. You decide that you really want to get into clinical pharmacy, then you will go into a residency dedicated just for clinical pharmacy, and specialize in that, learn all about that, and essentially become the professional of clinical pharmacy. And the amount of time it takes is, I'm not entirely sure. It varies depending on residency to residency. It can be anywhere from 1 to 2 years, I believe. But by the end of it, you'll be a graduated pharmacist with about like 4-5 years of post undergraduate work. So in total, you'll have about 8-9 years of schooling before you'll be able to practice. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. So, I mean, I know that after medical school, the doctors that graduate from medical school, they have, I don't know if all of them, but I know some go into internships and then they go into residency. Is that something that happens in pharmacy too?
I'm not too knowledgeable about that. I wouldn't be surprised if there is internships, but I am not. Again, I'm not knowledgeable enough to speak upon that.
Sure. Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, there needs to be some way that you build up experience, right? Whether it's, you know, these IPPEs and APPEs or residencies, you know, you got to have some way to build up experience, because you spend all your time reading these books, but what is it all good for if you can't apply the knowledge that you learned, right? So it's important to build up experience no matter the study. And, you know, there are different ways to do that. The you know, practices in medicine, whether it's pharmacy or for physicians, there are ways to get experience that are undoubtedly going to be part of your curriculum and your career, and you'll figure that out as you go. Because like you said, it differs by study. I know that there are different residencies, and they all span a different number of years. So, like you said, some last 1, 2, sometimes even 3. I'm sure it's going to be the same with pharmacy, depending on what field you choose within pharmacy itself. It's going to take a different amount of time, and that makes sense, right? Some fields just need more time for you to cover everything. So I guess after schooling, after residency is done, of course, your goal is to become a professional practicing pharmacist at some point. So to wrap up the episode, this is the last question. What does the job market look like? Have you researched into you know, what kind of pharmacist you want to be? What does the job market look like for that kind of pharmacist and that kind of field? Have you looked into any of that at all?
Yes, I have. I've done quite a bit of research on the job market, and like I've mentioned before, I'm definitely interested in the field of nuclear pharmacy, and it's primarily because of the hours, right? The hours span from, like, you know, getting to work at 3 a.m. and your shift ends at something like 12 p.m. It's my type of lifestyle. But
yeah,
that's a very, very specific field of pharmacy that I'm looking into, right? The job market for typical pharmacists that work in a Walgreens, Walmart, or Costco, those are getting phased out, and it's going to happen, rightfully so, because of the automation that's happening now, right? A computer is able to recognize and, like, check things at an incredible speed in comparison to humans, right? We all know this. And, you know, it explains why we're not seeing so many, it's explaining why we're seeing so many self-service checkout desks at, for example, like Target, right? You can check out your own groceries or whatever. And the same thing is going to happen to pharmacy. So those jobs, right? The days of the pharmacist at Walgreens that you just sit back and, dispense medication whenever, those days are over. We're here to solve problems, right? We're here to try to enhance and enrich the medical field. So, what my education at UCSF is going to do for me, and honestly, I'm glad that I got into UCSF. It's going to make me a problem solver. It's going to make me adaptable to these situations. So, I have no interest in joining the community pharmacy field, which is stuff like Walgreens and whatnot. I want to become specialized. I want to have a special skill set with regards to pharmacy. And that's where the market is going towards now, more specialization, right? Because, like I've mentioned, computers are essentially going to make life easier. And unfortunately, one of the things that it's going to remove are things like pharmacists working in stores like Walgreens or Rite Aid, stuff like that. So you have to become adaptable to these kind of markets. I specifically remember during my time in SJSU, I was an officer for the pre-pharmacy club. I was the secretary of that club. So I coordinated a lot with different pharmacy recruiters and different professors from pharmacy schools to get them to come to SJSU and give a presentation about their program and whatnot.
Wow.
And one of them was from Roseman University in Nevada. And this is exactly what he told me. He told me, like, if you do not adapt, then there's obviously not going to be anything for you, right? Society is always changing. Technology is always improving. So if you don't adapt, of course, nothing's going to be there for you. But with all these different opportunities that are closing, new opportunities are also opening up. And one of these opportunities, for example, are the insurance companies that are hiring pharmacists now. And they're essentially hiring pharmacists because they want to reduce the cost of medications being given to people that are injured in, let's say, car accidents, right?
Right.
So in doing so, they just drastically reduce the cost. They save millions and millions of dollars for these insurance companies. And they've reduced the cost so much so that they're willing to hire more and more pharmacists because, one, pharmacists typically work cheaper than hiring a medical doctor would be. And two, they have the proper background in all the medications, so they would know what would work, what doesn't work. And also you would have to keep up with the literature and stuff like that, and recent drugs that, that could potentially put a big hole in your wallet. So with old doors closing, there are also new ones. And I'm looking to be one of the people that potentially makes one of the new doors.
Gotcha. So I guess what I'm gathering from all of this is something that I really resonate with. And we preach this all the time on the podcast. It's that no matter what you decide to study, whatever you decide to major in, whatever you decide to do, you have to stay adaptable. And we had an episode a while ago. I forget the episode number. I'm not really a one of those podcasters that knows every single episode from the top of their head. But we had an episode a while ago talking about future-proofing your degree, and that episode basically talks about adaptability, adapting to different situations, adapting to the changing world, and how different fields are going away, new fields are sprouting, fields that are just ancient are now being rewritten and changed and morphed into something that is not recognizable, that isn't recognizable if you looked at it 30, 50 years ago. So our point, and something that we preach all the time, is you need to be adaptable, right? And I commend you for picking this path in particular, just so that you can be adaptable. One other thing that you mentioned that made me smile was that you said that UCSF is going to teach you how to be a problem solver, and in a nutshell, that's what computer science is we're all just problem solvers. It's just like we do math, we do computers, we do the numbers, and we solve problems with algorithms and such like. And it's funny how you say that you're learning how to be a problem solver in the field of pharmacy, and it just looks like at this point, we're all problem solvers. We just know how to solve different kinds of problems, and the key to problem solving is critical thinking. And luckily for us, computers haven't gotten the ability to think critically yet. So yes. We're still in the market for a lot of those critical thinking roles. And you know what? That's largely the reason why a lot of roles that are a little bit more mundane, don't require a lot of thought, or it might require knowledge, but once you acquire that knowledge, it doesn't really require much to apply that knowledge. So a lot of those fields are disappearing, and the roles that require a higher level of critical thinking, problem solving, and logic and thinking out things, that those roles are going to remain, because computers can't do that yet, at least not very, very effectively. Can't make those kinds of critical thinking decisions. So those roles appear to be in the market for now, but as always, the world can change, and it can shift right below your feet. So the only thing that we can all do is to just stay adaptable. So that's going to be it for this episode. I want to take some time to thank you, William, for joining us on the show today. I think you gave a lot of great advice for students who are not engineers. I know students who listen to this podcast might not be engineers, but you listen to two engineers ramble all the time about school, and it's nice to hear somebody who isn't an engineer talk about their role, their background, and their path, and what they're doing, because that might be a student out there that's listening to us. So thank you, William, for joining us on the show. You were a great guest. You handled all those questions admirably, and you answered all of them. And I think a lot of students are going to take a lot from this episode. And now I'd like to thank you, the audience, for listening to the Study Space podcast. We know that there are hundreds of podcasts being published every single day. Obviously, now that the pandemic is upon us, a lot of people are at home, and they too are recording podcasts. So now there are even more podcasts still being published every single day, and you have decided to listen to ours in particular. It really means a lot to all of us, particularly to me, that you have given us your time to listen to a couple of students ramble on about school. The show notes for this show, with links and everything we mentioned in this episode for further reading and learning, are on our website at uniplan.dev. If you want to show support, share the podcast or tell your friends about it. Your testimonial to your friends and family is the most helpful thing you can do for us. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. That's going to be it for this one. We will see you next time on the Study Space podcast.